Alright, everybody, Cinephile Mike is here, and it is day 53 of Oscar Rewind, my bi-weekly series of video commentary that reflect the work of this past year's Oscar nominees and winners. I'm digging deep into those IMDb profiles, and my hope is that you will discover a new, older favorite, or maybe something you haven't seen in a while. As always, I'll be discussing the recent Oscar connection, awards history for the film, box office information, critical response, and as always, these reviews are spoiler-free. Now, before we jump in, do me a favor, click that subscribe button because you definitely want to be a part of all the cinematic goodness coming your way here on the channel. So, we are dedicated to Visual Month, and this episode is my third of looking at the Visual Effects Awards from this year's Oscars, and my last focus before I move into our other visuals, editing, and cinematography. To wrap up this little trifecta, I am looking at Paramount Pictures' Zodiac. Written by James Vanderbilt, based on the best-selling books Zodiac and Zodiac Unmasked, both written by Robert Graysmith. The film was directed by David Fincher and was released early in 2007. The film currently sits with a worldwide box office total of $84,786,496 from an initial domestic take of $33,080,084, an international take of $51,706,412 from its initial international release, and then there was a small Australian re-release in 2022 which made up the difference. Critically, the film sits with 263 critic reviews, resulting in a 90%, and over 250,000 audience reviews, resulting in a popcorn meter of 77%. Now, award season-wise, Zodiac didn't crack the major awards, but Fincher was a nominee for the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and worth noting, for why we are here, 2 nominations by the Visual Effects Society Awards, one for supporting visuals in a motion picture, and the other for outstanding created environment in a live-action motion picture. Additionally, the film received various nods and wins from different guilds as well as several film festivals around the globe. As for the visual effects, Eric Barber earned his first visual effects supervisor credit working on this look at the famed serial killer. And in the intervening almost 2 decades, he has been nominated for 2 Oscars for his visual effects work on different teams. One was for the visual effects supervisor on digital effects, the same job he had in Zodiac, for another Fincher project, 2008's The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and most recently for serving as the production visual effects supervisor for this year's nominated Alien Romulus. So clearly, no stranger to bloody effects. And this was definitely the case for some of the scenes that we are treated to here as we are witness to some of the gruesome murders by the Zodiac Killer. So, let's get into the film a bit. Based on books written about one of the oldest unsolved murder cases, our film covers the roughly 2 decades that this case was part of the life of the author of these books, Robert Graysmith, in the film played by Jake Gyllenhaal. Now, at the time of the first murder, Graysmith was working as a political cartoonist at the San Francisco Chronicle. While in an editorial meeting alongside crime reporter Paul Avery, played by Robert Downey Jr., they received the Zodiac's first famed letter with orders to print a coded message on the cover of the paper. Graysmith believes that this, though, it's not as simple, and he is not taken very seriously, though the claims are. Eventually, Avery comes around, starts to talk with Graysmith about the letters, believing that there is more to these messages, as Graysmith begins to connect it to the famed 1932 film, The Most Dangerous Game, as a message in the letter talks about man being the most dangerous animal of all. Slowly, these two forge a bit of a working relationship to try and solve the puzzle of who is the Zodiac. Meanwhile, the authorities are doing this as well, primarily led by San Francisco police inspectors Dave Toschi, played by Mark Ruffalo, and his partner Bill Armstrong, played by Anthony Edwards. As each murder takes place, they try to solve the puzzle, only complicated by the receiving of letters and phone calls from the killer. Or is it that simple? Several people claim to be the Zodiac, and as the years pass, everything becomes more complicated. And as the case begins to take its toll, some people working on this will end up diverting their attention or seeing their careers take hits, while others will become obsessive in solving this puzzle despite the implications on their personal lives. And without saying too much more, I will take away from this. I don't want to take away from the slow burn that Fincher crafts in its roughly 2.5-hour runtime. This really is a well-crafted film that takes you into the history of the case, and unless you are really well-versed in it, it really gives you a lot of those small details embedded within, including leading to the foremost suspect in the case, who was even at one point brought in and questioned, although it couldn't quite be pegged on them. If you aren't familiar with who this is, it's really fun to go along with the case. And it's interesting. We spend more time sitting in news offices or the police stations as we follow the pieces as opposed to the actual murders. I mean, we see those, but it's not always the focus. And to tell this story, Fincher's brought together quite a cast. I mean, while the aforementioned for Gyllenhaal, Downey, Ruffalo, Edwards, this film has a powerful ensemble that includes the likes of Brian Cox, Philip Baker Hall, Elias Koteas, Donal Logue, Dermot Mulroney, John Carroll Lynch, Chloe Sevigny, Clea Duvall, June Diane Raphael, and so many more. And each performer has the opportunity to make their mark, even if they only have a few scenes to do it. As for the story, Fincher didn't shy away from the gruesome history. Throughout, we are treated to several deaths, and this is where Barber and his team come in. Now, due to complications from not wanting to repeatedly wash costumes, and also some of the cities, because they shot in the real cities, they didn't want these recreations happening. So a lot of the blood work, and yes, spoiler, there's a lot, was mainly added post-production. It all looks like practical effects, which speaks to the high level of the work of the visual effects team. It doesn't really look that fake. Maybe a couple moments. Each piece works together to tell this story, and while it's horrific, Fincher smartly does not frame this as a horror film. We see each crime as it's occurring in the real time, so we're able to adjust to the awful nature of it. So we don't get like jump scares or these tragic moments. It's just we're really seeing history play out in front of us. History as much has been reported. Additionally, the aesthetic of the time is perfectly captured by Donald Graham Burt's production design, Casey Storm's costume design. As we advance from the late 1960s to the early 1990s, we follow the progression with some really beautifully captivating cinematography by Harris Savides, who balances a lot of close-up and mid-shots as we engage with these performers, as well as treated to some really disturbing wide shots when we have to see some of the atrocities that we're about to be witness to. All in all, I'm surprised it's actually taken me this long to watch this film, being a fan of Fincher and this cast. I watched the director's cut, which is about 6-7 minutes longer, and maybe that's why I put it off, because sometimes I look at runtimes and I have to decide if it's worth the investment to go into something for over 2.5 hours, because oftentimes, you've heard me talk about it here, I'm like, some films do not need to be that long, and sometimes they're just too much. Again, kicking myself, this one, it really fit its timeline perfectly. Also, I have to say, fun side note, nothing about the film, but there's one scene in particular between Downey and Ruffalo that echoed what they would be doing several years later in the first Avengers film. So that was kind of a funny moment to take in. You'll see the one I'm talking about. So, as for a rating, not shocking here, as most Fincher films are for me, Zodiac is a 5-star film, and whether you decide to see the theatrical or the director's cut, both of them are worth the time investment. As of this recording and posting, the theatrical version of the film is available to stream with commercials on Tubi, or if you subscribe to Paramount Plus, it is there ad-free. If you would like to watch the director's cut, you can find it for purchase or digital rental on most platforms, as well as physical purchase. Remember those claims to buy physical media. Alrighty, so there you go. Next handful of reviews, and then we're going to start looking at cinematography of different films, and, have the same fun as always. If you like what you heard here, please subscribe to the channel, like and share the video, spread the word. You can follow me, Cinephile Mike, on all social media platforms and on Letterboxd. Find lots of great additional content on my website, cinephilemike.com. All right, happy watching, everyone, and until next time, this is Cinephile Mike saying take a break, and watch something new.